Right after President Obama signed health reform legislation, you might remember that the new conservative Attorney General of Virginia had his staff race to a federal courthouse to sue the federal government over that legislation. After Virginians protested that maybe that was a waste of taxpayer money, the Attorney General, Ken Cuccinelli, said, pshaw, this lawsuit's only going to cost the state $350. It will only cost the filing fee. The state payroll attorney time, that's free or something. While a total cost of $350 may seem unbelievably low, the lawsuit itself appears to be worth quite a lot to Mr. Cuccinelli. Because look what came through our fax machine today. A letter from Ken Cuccinelli's campaign. It begins, quote, Dear blank, I urge you to sign and return the enclosed pledge of support to challenge Obamacare. The clock is now ticking and I need your help and support today. The fight is not over. In fact, it has just begun because there is something that you and I can do to stop this legislation in its tracks. What can you and I do to help Ken Cuccinelli stop Obamacare in its tracks? It gets better. Quote, ignoring the outcry of opposition from millions of Americans, they got what they wanted and passed the bill into law. I will not sit on the sidelines and allow the Constitution to be violated, and I have already filed suit to have the Obamacare law rightfully ruled unconstitutional. So he's already taken care of that $350 quixotic lawsuit thing. What's left for us to do? Here it is. Quote, please join side by side with me in this effort to immediately signing the enclosed pledge of support to challenge Obamacare and returning it to me today along with your most generous contribution of $25, $50, $75, $100, $250, $500 or more to Cuccinelli for Attorney General. Send money now and lots of it. That's what you can do because I'm using the entire legal apparatus of the state of Virginia to bring a quixotic stunt of a lawsuit whose real cost I won't reveal, but which will help me in my political career. Join together, everyone. Quote, I am reaching out to my supporters from across the Commonwealth to join with me in this fight today. The bill for the government takeover of health care is not merely a bill that adversely affects Virginia. Rather, it affects every single citizen of all 50 states. The bottom line is this. If we can prove that this massive overreach of federal authority is unconstitutional, you and millions of Virginians and Americans will not have to worry about blah, 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 the end of the civilized world. That we will still have totally shameless, peacocking stuntmen attorney generals to contend with. Those never seem to go away. Send money! A month after President Obama lifted the decades-old moratorium on exploratory offshore oil drilling, an offshore oil lake oozes 210,000 gallons a day of raw crude, a leak 5 times worse than what was originally thought. It threatens to devastate Louisiana's environmentally fragile coast.
DHS Secretary Napolitano announced that this incident is of national significance, and the Department of Interior has announced that they will be sending SWAT teams to the Gulf to inspect all platforms and rigs. While BP is ultimately responsible for funding the cost of response and cleanup operations, my administration will continue to use every single available resource at our disposal, including potentially the Department of Defense, to address the incident.
BP has, in fact, already asked the Department of Defense for help, specifically with underwater equipment. There's also now a third leak point from the blown-out well, nearly a mile underwater. So far, BP's efforts to stop the leak using robots has failed. They're also now suggesting technologies like a giant dome to cap the leak site and chemicals that could break up the oil underwater. Those are technologies never before used in water this deep. And while the Coast Guard did report some success with a controlled burn of surface oil yesterday, it's not enough. This massive oil slick has now started coming ashore at the mouth of the Mississippi River in Louisiana as of tonight. Joining us now is Michael Brune. He's the executive director of the Sierra Club, which opposes offshore drilling. Mr. Brune, thanks very much for your time.
Hi, Rachel. Thanks for having me on.
Put this into some context for us. How bad an oil spill is this one in the Gulf, given other spills that we understand?
Well, you know, first, if you're one of the 11 families of the workers who are missing, it's devastating. If you're a member of the fishing industry in the Gulf, it's devastating to your livelihoods. And, you know, of course, the impact on wildlife is extreme. It'll take decades. Even if the cleanup is successful, it'll take decades to recover from this. So it's a great tragedy.
The administration implied today that they're going to take this spill into consideration when figuring out the details of their expansion of offshore drilling. Do you believe that any new offshore drilling carries this inherent risk of environmental disaster?
Of course, of course. You know, even the Mineral Mining Service a couple of years ago, under the Bush administration, said that we should expect a major oil spill from offshore oil drilling every year. Arguably, you know, not one this large, but what we know is that drilling for oil is a very dirty, we now know that it's deadly, and it's certainly an extremely dangerous business. And when you compare that to investments in clean energy, the choice becomes clear that we should just not be expanding offshore oil drilling. We should actually be starting to minimize it.
Well, let me ask you about one specific thing about this that bothers me. The Deepwater Horizon rig, this rig that caught fire and sunk, one of the most technologically advanced in the world, if not the most advanced deepwater rig in the world. But even as drilling technology is advanced so we can do it in places that we couldn't do it before, it doesn't seem like we bothered to make sure we knew how to clean up in these places if we needed to. Am I being naive to think that the regulatory process, the approval process, should link those two things, that you shouldn't be approved to drill deeper than you know how to clean up?
Of course. You know, just to put it another way, we've all heard about the need to separate church and state. We need to separate oil and state. The reality is that we just don't have effective regulation over the oil industry in the Gulf and the North Slope in Alaska, really anywhere around the world. And so we shouldn't be expecting the oil industry to police itself, and the MMS, the Coast Guard, lack the adequate resources and the capacity to effectively manage the industry. So whether we're talking about this one particular rig or whether we're talking about the impact of the industry more systemically, there are big problems that need to be resolved.
Michael Bruin is Executive Director of the Sierra Club. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I appreciate your insight.
Thanks again for having me on.
Because we all need a little terrifying cuddle now and then. We turn now to our big Arctic mammal outreach correspondent, Mr. Kent Jones. Hi, Kent.
Hi, Rachel. Once again, the great, the peerless Vladimir Putin schools the entire West in the manly, masculine art of the self-serving photo op. And this time, he's got a bear with him. It's fantastic.
I'm so looking forward to this.
Bear.
Ever since Teddy Roosevelt created the template, our leaders have taken great pains to display themselves as athletic, strong, testosterone-y macho guys. Emphasis on pain. Woo! Aside from a certain Austro-Californian governor, this strategy has generally succeeded only in making voters spit soda out of their nostrils. Have Americans learned nothing from Vladimir Putin? Behold Vlad! Judo master, horseman, fisherman, spectacular hero of Y-chromosome pseudo-democracy. In his latest action hero role, Putin and a team of scientists trekked way up north so he could lay a concerned hand on this very confused, very tranquilized polar bear. Which makes sense because polar bears and Putin are a natural fit. Both are beefy carnivores that belong to a species that will probably be gone in 20 years. Putin helped tag Brother Bear with a satellite tracking device to monitor his migration habits. After much deliberation, Putin decided to leave his shirt on. Bold choice. You gotta admit, he controls his message brilliantly, even though Putin called the bear the master of the Arctic. At the photo op, he made it very clear that he is the master of the Arctic. And what about the hat, huh? It's cool, yeah? So that's how it's done, Yankee politicians. Drug them and then pet them.
So wrong in so many ways. Thank you very much, Kat. Appreciate that. If you'd like to learn more about the group FAIR, who wrote the Arizona anti-immigration law and whose president was the subject of the interview here on the show tonight, we've posted a little bit of homework, some background reading about FAIR at our blog, maddowblog.msnbc.com. FAIR gets represented in the mainstream media as a mainstream group. I think our reporting on them shows that moderate reputation to be undeserved. That does it for us tonight.